Her wedding dress torn and bloodied, Amelia collapsed on the silent rancher's doorstep as rain washed away her past but couldn't erase the terror in her eyes. In that moment, something cracked in Lucas Blackwood's shattered soul. The man who hadn't uttered a word in 3 years suddenly needed to speak again. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. Amelia Bennett ran until her lungs burned and her legs threatened to buckle beneath her. The rain, which had begun as a gentle patter against her skin, now poured in relentless sheets, plastering her once fine dress to her trembling form. The white fabric, her wedding dress, was torn at the hem and splattered with mud, a fitting reflection of her shattered plans and desperate flight. 3 days earlier, she had been the dutiful daughter of Boston's most prominent banker, reluctantly preparing to marry Judge Harold Carmichael, a man 30 years her senior with cold eyes and a reputation for cruelty masked by wealth and social standing. The arrangement, her father had explained with business-like detachment, would save their family from financial ruin following a series of poor investments. "You'll learn to appreciate him," her mother had whispered while adjusting Amelia's veil on the morning of the wedding. But the resignation in her eyes told a different story, a story Amelia refused to accept as her own. She had fled through the church's back entrance while guests assembled in the pews, leaving behind everything she had ever known. Now, after days of hiding in barns and stealing rides on westbound freight trains, she found herself in the vast emptiness of Wyoming territory, miles from civilization and completely, utterly lost. Lightning split the darkening sky, momentarily illuminating a structure in the distance. Hope flared in Amelia's chest. Shelter. She staggered forward, each step a battle against the wind and her own exhaustion. As she drew closer, she made out the silhouette of a modest ranch house and barn, nestled against the backdrop of rugged mountains. No lanterns glowed in the windows. No smoke curled from the chimney despite the unseasonable chill. She hesitated at the edge of the property, doubt mingling with desperation. What if the occupants were no better than the man she'd fled? What if they turned her away? Or worse, recognized her from the notices her father had surely dispatched by now? Another crack of lightning decided for her. She hurried toward the porch, her sodden skirts heavy around her ankle. 3 timid knocks brought no response. She tried again, louder this time, pressing her ear to the rough-hewn door. Nothing. Her hand found the latch, and to her surprise, it gave way beneath her touch. The door swung open on protesting hinges, revealing darkness beyond. "Hello?" Amelia called, her voice small against the storm's fury. "Is anyone here? I mean no harm. I just need shelter until the storm passes." Only silence answered her. Gathering what remained of her courage, she stepped inside, leaving puddles of rainwater on the plank floor. The interior was spare, but clean. A stone fireplace dominated one wall. A table with 2 chairs occupied the center of the room, and a narrow bed stood in the corner. Everything was meticulously arranged, yet something about the space felt incomplete, as though life had been removed from it, leaving only the shell behind. The sudden sound of heavy footsteps on the porch sent her heart racing. Before she could hide, the door burst open and a man filled the frame, his broad shoulders silhouetted by another flash of lightning. He was tall, taller than any man she'd encountered, with a frame honed by physical labor. Rain dripped from the brim of his hat and the shoulders of his duster. For a long, terrible moment, he simply stared at her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. Amelia backed away until her spine pressed against the edge of the table. "Forgive the intrusion," she stammered. "The storm. I had nowhere else to go." The man stepped inside, closing the door against the howling wind. He struck a match, the small flame revealing a face that might have been handsome once, before life had carved its hardships into it. A jagged scar ran from his left temple to the corner of his mouth, pulling it into a permanent half-grimace. His eyes were startlingly gentle, a warm amber that reminded her of autumn afternoons. He lit a lantern, then shrugged off his wet coat and hung it beside the door. Every movement was deliberate, efficient. Not once did he speak. "My name is Amelia," she offered into the silence, unsure what else to say. "I won't stay long, just until the rain stops." The man regarded her for a moment, then moved to the fireplace. With practiced motions, he arranged kindling and logs, then lit them. Within minutes, flames licked at the dry wood, casting the room in a golden glow and sending blessed warmth through Amelia's chilled body. He straightened and pointed to a trunk at the foot of the bed, then to her sodden dress. Understanding dawned. "Oh, yes, I should change before I catch my death." Her cheeks warmed at the impropriety of the situation, but her practical nature prevailed. Pneumonia would do her no good. The man nodded once, then turned his back, moving to a small kitchen area where he busied himself with a kettle and stove. Amelia opened the trunk to find a man's shirt and trousers, worn but clean. She glanced at her silent host, who kept his attention pointedly fixed on his task. With fingers numbed by cold, she struggled out of her ruined wedding dress and into the borrowed clothes, rolling the sleeves and pant legs to accommodate her smaller frame. "I'm decent now," she announced, feeling strangely vulnerable in the oversized garments. The man turned, and something shifted in his expression, a softening around the eyes, perhaps, or a slight relaxation of his jaw. He gestured for her to sit at the table, then placed a steaming mug of coffee before her. "Thank you." Amelia said, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic. "You're very kind to help a stranger." He shook his head slightly as if dismissing her gratitude, then sat across from her. From his pocket he withdrew a small slate and piece of chalk. He wrote quickly, then turned it toward her. Lucas Blackwood. "This is my ranch. Why are you running?" The direct question startled her almost as much as his chosen method of communication. "How did you know I was running?" He erased the slate with his sleeve and wrote again. Wedding dress. Fear in your eyes. Miles from anywhere. Amelia stared into her coffee, considering how much to reveal. This man Lucas had shown her nothing but kindness. Yet her recent experiences had taught her caution. Still, something about his silent presence inspired trust. "I was to be married today," she had, "to a man I neither loved nor respected, a man who would have extinguished everything I am." She looked up, meeting Lucas's steady gaze. "So I ran." Lucas nodded slowly, understanding in his eyes. He wrote again. "You can stay tonight. Dangerous for a woman alone." Relief washed over her. "Just tonight," she agreed. "I'll be on my way tomorrow." But even as she said it, exhaustion swept through her in an overwhelming wave. Days of fear and flight caught up at once, and she swayed in her chair. Lucas was beside her in an instant, his strong hands steadying her shoulders. He guided her to the bed, gesturing for her to lie down. Too tired to protest, Amelia sank onto the thin mattress. Lucas covered her with a worn quilt that smelled of sun and open air. The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was his tall figure, outlined by firelight, standing guard against whatever dangers the night might bring. She didn't know then that this silent rancher would become her sanctuary, or that the storm raging outside was nothing compared to what would follow when her past caught up with her, or that the man who hadn't spoken a word in 3 years would find his voice again for her. Dawn broke with tentative fingers of light stretching across the horizon, painting the rain-washed world in hues of gold and amber. Amelia woke to the unfamiliar sounds of a working ranch, the distant lowing of cattle, the soft nickering of horses, the rhythmic chopping of wood. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back. Her escape, the storm, the silent rancher who had offered shelter. She sat up slowly, her body protesting after days of hard travel. Lucas was nowhere to be seen, but evidence of his consideration surrounded her. A basin of clean water had been placed on the table, along with a towel and a small piece of soap. Beside it lay a simple cotton dress, faded but clean and far more practical than her ruined wedding gown. A note rested atop the dress. For you. Previous housekeeper left behind. Back by noon. Amelia touched the simple garment with something like reverence. When was the last time someone had shown her such thoughtfulness without expectation? Certainly not her father, who measured everything in terms of business advantage. Not her mother, whose affection had always been contingent on proper behavior. After washing and changing, Amelia explored the small ranch house. Though modest in size, it bore the marks of meticulous care. Floors swept clean, dishes arranged with precision, not a speck of dust on any surface. The only personal touches were a small bookshelf filled with well-worn volumes and a framed photograph on the mantel. Curiosity drew her to the image. It showed a younger Lucas, his face unmarked by the scar that now bisected it, standing beside a pretty woman who held a baby in her arm. All three smiled at the camera, a perfect family portrait frozen in time. "What happened to you?" she whispered, tracing the edge of the frame. The answer came in the form of a newspaper clipping tucked behind the photograph. The headline made her blood run cold. "Tragedy strikes Blackwood Ranch. Mother and child killed in raid." Amelia's hands trembled as she read the brief article. 3 years ago, while Lucas was in town purchasing supplies, a group of outlaws had attacked his ranch. His wife, Rebecca, and 8-month-old son, Thomas, had been killed. Lucas had arrived home in time to confront the attackers, suffering a near-fatal wound to his throat in the process. Though he survived, the injury had left him unable to speak. "Oh, Lucas," Amelia breathed, her heart aching for this man who had shown her kindness despite his own overwhelming loss. The sound of approaching hoofbeats startled her from her reverie. She quickly replaced the clipping and moved to the window, her pulse quickening. 2 riders approached. Neither was Lucas. One wore the unmistakable badge of a lawman, while the other was dressed in the fine clothes of an Eastern gentleman. Fear clutched at her throat. Had they found her already? How? She glanced frantically around the room, seeking somewhere to hide, but it was too late. The men were dismounting, their boots heavy on the porch steps. A sharp knock rattled the door. "Hello? Anyone home?" called a gruff voice. Amelia remained silent, pressing herself against the wall beside the window, praying they would leave. "I know someone's in there," the voice continued. "We're looking for a young woman runaway bride from back east, Amelia Bennett. Her father's offering a substantial reward for her safe return." Her father's emissary had come with the law on his side. Amelia closed her eyes, despair washing over her. What had she expected? That a man like Edward Bennett would simply allow his daughter to disappear, taking her valuable marital prospects with her. The door handle rattled. "Ma'am, if you're Amelia Bennett, you should know that your fiancé is mighty worried. Judge Carmichael has men searching for states for you." Amelia bit her lip to keep from crying out. The thought of being returned to that man, to his cold, possessive gaze and plans for their marriage, was unbearable. The sound of another horse approaching brought a fresh wave of panic, until she recognized the rider's broad shoulders and unmistakable silhouette. Lucas had returned. She watched through the window as he dismounted, eyeing the strangers with wary reserve. The lawman stepped forward. "Morning, Sheriff Tom Parker from Willow Creek. This here's Mr. James Hughes. Come all the way from Boston looking for his employer's daughter." The sheriff gestured toward the house. "Wondered if you might have seen her pretty young thing, about 20, brown hair. Might be wearing a damaged wedding dress." Lucas shook his head slowly, his face betraying nothing. "Mind if we take a look inside?" Hughes asked, his tone suggesting it wasn't really a question. "Mr. Bennett is most concerned for his daughter's welfare." Lucas squared his shoulders, planting himself firmly between the men and his door. He pulled out his slate and wrote something, holding it up for them to read. The sheriff frowned. "No one here but you, and we should take your word because ... Lucas wrote again, more forcefully this time. Fine, the sheriff conceded. "I know your reputation, Blackwood. If you say she's not here, I believe you." He turned to Hughes. "This man doesn't speak on account of an old injury, but he's known to be honest. If the girl passed through, he'd say so." Hughes looked unconvinced. "Mr. Bennett will be disappointed. We had reliable information she was headed this way." His gaze swept across the property, lingering on the house. "Very well. We'll continue our search elsewhere. But if you do encounter Miss Bennett, there's a $500 reward for information leading to her recovery." Lucas nodded once, his expression remaining impassive. Amelia held her breath until the sound of hoofbeats faded into the distance. Only then did she allow herself to collapse into a chair, her legs suddenly too weak to support her. The door opened and Lucas entered, his eyes immediately finding her. Relief was evident in the slight softening of his features. He crossed to the table and wrote on his slate, "Asterisk, they're gone. For now." "Asterisk, you lied for me," Amelia said, wonder in her voice. "You could have collected that reward." Lucas erased the slate and wrote again. "Something's worth more than money. They'll come back," she warned. "My father is not a man who accepts defeat." Asterisk, where will you go? The question hung between them, heavy with implications. Amelia had fled with no real plan beyond escape, no destination in mind, no future to speak of. "I don't know," she admitted. "Somewhere they won't find me. Somewhere I can be ... free." Lucas considered this, then wrote, "Stay here, work. I need help with ranch." Amelia stared at him in disbelief. "You would do that? Risk harboring a fugitive?" His response was simple. Asterisk, not fugitive. Just a woman who deserves choice. Asterisk, tears welled in Amelia's eyes. In all her 20 years, no one had ever suggested that what she wanted might matter. Her father had dictated her education, her mother her deportment, and Judge Carmichael would have controlled her very existence. Yet here was this man, this stranger who had lost everything, offering her the one thing she'd never had, agency over her own life. "I don't know the first thing about ranch work," she confessed. Lucas's mouth quirked in what might have been the ghost of a smile. "I can teach you. They'll come looking again," she cautioned. "Let them." His expression hardened with determination. In that moment, standing in a stranger's home hundreds of miles from everything she'd ever known, Amelia made her decision. "All right," she said, squaring her shoulders. "I'll stay, at least until I figure out where to go next." Lucas nodded once, satisfaction evident in his amber eyes. He gestured toward the door, then wrote, "Asterisk, first lesson starts now. Horses need feeding." Asterisk, Amelia laughed, despite herself, a sound so unexpected it startled them both. "I suppose there's no time like the present to begin my new life as a rancher's assistant." As she followed Lucas outside into the clear morning light, Amelia couldn't help but feel that for the first time in her life, she was walking towards something rather than away from it. Days on the Blackwood ranch slipped into weeks with a rhythm Amelia found surprisingly comforting. Each morning began before dawn, with Lucas already at work by the time she emerged from the small storage room he had converted into a bedroom for her. They shared simple meals at the kitchen table, communicating through his slate and her increasingly animated responses. At first, her hands blistered and her muscles screamed in protest against the unaccustomed labor. Boston society had not prepared her for mucking stalls, feeding livestock, or mending fences. Yet she attacked each task with determination, refusing to be defeated by her own soft upbringing. Lucas proved to be a patient teacher. His instructions, written in terse but clear phrases, were always accompanied by practical demonstrations. When she failed, and she failed often in those early days, there was never judgment in his eyes, only quiet encouragement to try again. "I must look a fright," Amelia commented one evening, catching her reflection in the small mirror above the wash basin. Her once smooth hands were calloused, her face sun-kissed in a way that would have horrified her mother, and her hair was secured in a practical braid rather than the elaborate styles she'd worn in Boston. Lucas glanced up from the book he was reading by the fire. He wrote briefly on his slate, "You look strong." Something warm unfurled in Amelia's chest at those simple words. In Boston, she had been praised for her delicate appearance, her ornamental qualities. No one had ever valued her strength. "Thank you," she said softly. "I'm starting to feel strong too." The next day brought her first real test when Lucas indicated they would ride to the north pasture to check on a pregnant heifer. Amelia froze, embarrassment heating her cheeks. "I don't know how to ride," she admitted. In Boston, she had been driven in carriages. never trusted to handle the horses herself. Lucas considered this information, then wrote, "Today you learn." He led her to the corral where a gentle mare with a dappled coat stood patiently. With methodical care, he showed Amelia how to approach the horse, how to saddle her, how to hold the rein. When it came time to mount, he stood close, his hands encircling her waist to lift her into the saddle. The brief contact sent an unexpected shiver through Amelia. Lucas stepped back quickly, his eyes averted, and she wondered if he had felt it too. That strange current that seemed to pass between them with increasing frequency. By the time they returned from checking the heifer, Amelia was sore but exhilarated. She had ridden a horse, actually controlled the animal herself, across open country. It was a small victory, but it tasted sweet. That night, Lucas wrote something that made her heart skip. "You belong here." 3 simple words that somehow meant everything. As Amelia settled into ranch life, she began making subtle changes to the house. Fresh wildflowers appeared on the table. Curtains fashioned from spare fabric brightened the windows. The aroma of home-cooked meals, initially disastrous but improving with practice, replaced the basic fare Lucas had subsisted on. Most significantly, laughter returned to the Blackwood ranch. Amelia found humor in her own mistakes and joy in small triumph. And though Lucas never laughed aloud, the crinkles around his eyes deepened when she amused him, and occasionally his shoulders would shake with silent mirth. It was during the 6th week of her stay that Amelia discovered the box. She had been cleaning the narrow space beneath Lucas's bed when her cloth caught on something. Pulling gently, she revealed a wooden box, beautifully crafted but thick with dust. She knew she should replace it immediately. This was clearly private, but curiosity overcame propriety. Inside lay a collection of papers, folded and refolded until the creases were in danger of tearing. Amelia opened one carefully, her breath catching at what she found. They were letters, dozens of them, all in Lucas's handwriting. Letters he had written after losing his voice, after losing his family. Letters full of rage and grief and loneliness that had never been sent because there was no one left to send them to. "I dreamed of you both last night," one began. Tommy was walking Rebecca, walking and laughing like he used to. "I reached for him, but my hands passed through air. I woke up screaming with no sound." Another read. "The doctor says my voice might come back someday. Now what's the point? The only people I wanted to speak to are gone." Tears blurred Amelia's vision as she read letter after letter, each one a piece of Lucas's shattered heart poured onto paper because he had no other outlet for his pain. "Amelia?" The creak of the door startled her so badly she dropped the box, scattering letters across the floor. Lucas stood in the doorway, his slate fallen forgotten at his side, his face ashen. It took her a moment to register what had happened. He had spoken her name, actually spoken it, his voice rough from disuse but unmistakable. "Lucas," she gasped, horrified at being caught intruding on his privacy. "I'm so sorry. I was cleaning, and I shouldn't have." He crossed the room in 3 long strides, kneeling to gather the scattered letters with trembling hands. "Please," Amelia whispered, reaching for him. "I didn't mean to pry. Lucas raised his head, and the naked pain in his eyes stopped her cold. He touched his throat, then shook his head sharply. "You spoke," she said gently. "You said my name." He stared at her, confusion mingling with something like fear on his face. She realized then that he hadn't been aware of breaking his silence. It had happened instinctively, a reaction to finding her with his most private thoughts. Amelia placed her hand over his where it clutched the letters. "I won't mention it again if you don't wish me to," she promised. "And I'm truly sorry for invading your privacy." Lucas released a shuddering breath. After a moment, he reached for his slate and wrote, "Not your fault. Should have told you about them. They're beautiful," Amelia said softly. "Heartbreaking, but beautiful. You love them very much." He nodded, eyes closing briefly against the memory of that love. When he opened them again, he wrote, "Hard to remember. Harder to forget. I can't imagine your loss," Amelia admitted, "but I understand loneliness." She hesitated, then added, "Sometimes I think that's why I couldn't marry the judge. Not just because I didn't love him, but because I knew I'd be more alone with him than without him." Lucas studied her face for a long moment, then wrote, "Are you lonely here?" The question caught her off guard. In Boston, surrounded by society, she had felt isolated, invisible beneath the perfect daughter persona she was required to maintain. Here, miles from civilization, with only a silent man for company, she felt seen. "No," she answered truthfully. "I'm not lonely here." Something shifted in Lucas's expression, a softening, a surrender. He gathered the remaining letters and returned them to their box, then held out his hand to help Amelia to her feet. They stood closer than propriety would allow, his calloused fingers still wrapped around hers. The air between them seemed to thicken, charged with unspoken possibilities. The moment was shattered by the sound of approaching horses, not 1 or 2, but several, moving at speed. Lucas released her hand and moved to the window, his body tensing at whatever he saw outside. He grabbed his slate, writing quickly, 5 men, armed, hide. Fear clutched at Amelia's throat. Who are they? Lucas's response chilled her to the bone. Asterisk, not law. Look like hired guns. Asterisk, her father had escalated from legal pursuit to something far more dangerous. These weren't men who would be satisfied with a reward for her safe return. These were men paid to bring her back by any means necessary. Lucas pressed his rifle into her hands and pointed toward the cellar door hidden beneath a rug in the corner. His eyes conveyed what his voice could not, a promise to protect her, whatever the cost. As Amelia descended into the darkness below, she heard the front door open and Lucas's boots on the wooden floor above. She clutched the rifle to her chest, praying that this man who had already lost so much would not sacrifice himself for her. The sound of the first gunshot tore through her like physical pain. Amelia's heart pounded in her ears as she crouched in the earthen cellar, rifle clutched to her chest. The dank space smelled of root vegetables and damp soil, but all she could focus on were the sounds above, boots scraping across wooden planks, the low murmur of men's voices, and most terrifying of all, the silence where Lucas's responses should have been. "We know you're harboring the Bennett girl," a gravelly voice announced. "Mr. Hughes sent us with a message from her father. This doesn't have to get messy." A pause. Then, "Not much for talking, are you? Fine. We'll make this simple. Hand over the girl, you get $500. Refuse, and we burn this place to the ground with you in it." Amelia's blood ran cold. These men weren't lawmen or even simple bounty hunters. They were thugs hired to retrieve her by any means necessary. She thought of the photograph on Lucas's mantle, of the family he had already lost, of the home he had rebuilt from the ashes of tragedy. Now her presence threatened to destroy it all again. Her fingers tightened on the rifle. She couldn't allow that to happen. Before she could move, a scuffle broke out above the crash of furniture. The thud of bodies colliding, a strangled cry cut short. Another gunshot rang out, followed by the distinctive sound of glass shattering. "Check the back," someone shouted. "Don't let him get away." Footsteps thundered across the floor, dispersing throughout the house. Amelia held her breath, straining to distinguish Lucas's movements from those of the intruders. A floorboard creaked directly overhead, and dust sifted down through the cracks, landing on her upturned face. The cellar door flew open with a crash. Amelia raised the rifle, finger trembling on the trigger, only to lower it immediately as Lucas dropped down beside her, blood streaming from a gash above his eye. He pressed a finger to his lips, then gestured for her to follow him deeper into the shadowy space. Behind a stack of crates, a narrow tunnel had been dug into the earth, an escape route Lucas must have created after the raid that claimed his family. He urged her forward, and Amelia didn't hesitate, crawling on hands and knees through the cramped passage until it widened into a shallow depression beneath the barn floor. Lucas pulled himself through behind her, then reached up to slide a concealed panel back into place, sealing the tunnel entrance. In the dimness, his eyes found hers, intense and questioning. She nodded, silently assuring him she was unharmed. They remained motionless, scarcely breathing, as boots stomped overhead and angry voices called to each other. The search continued for what felt like hours, but was likely only minutes before a new sound split the air, the crackling of flames. "They're burning the house," Amelia whispered, horror clawing at her throat. Lucas's jaw tightened, but he held her back when she would have moved toward the tunnel. He shook his head firmly, pointing upward to indicate the men were still present. "We can't just let them destroy everything," she protested, keeping her voice low. Lucas pulled out a small folded paper from his pocket. He'd brought his slate, prepared even in crisis. In the faint light filtering through the barn slats, he wrote, "Asterisk house can be rebuilt. You can't. Asterisk." Tears welled in Amelia's eyes. This man who had already lost so much was now watching his home burn, all to protect her, woman he'd known barely 2 months. "I'm so sorry," she choked out. "This is all my fault. I should never have stayed." Lucas's hand found hers in the darkness, his grip fierce and sure. He wrote again, "Asterisk my choice. No regrets. Asterisk." The simple declaration stole her breath. In that moment, huddled beneath the barn floor while his home blazed, Amelia realized a truth she could no longer deny. She had fallen in love with Lucas Blackwood. Not gradually or cautiously, but completely, irrevocably, with the kind of certainty she had never felt about anything in her sheltered life. And it terrified her, because love made her vulnerable in ways running never had. Love gave her something to lose. They remained hidden until nightfall, when the voices finally receded and the crackle of flames died down to ominous silence. Only then did Lucas lead her cautiously from their hiding place. The sight that greeted them in the moonlight was devastating. Where the ranch house had stood now lay a smoking ruin, timbers collapsed into ash, possessions reduced to cinders. The photograph of Lucas's family, the letters he had written in his grief, the books he had cherished, all gone. Amelia's legs gave way beneath her and she sank to the ground, overcome by the magnitude of destruction her presence had wrought. "What have I done?" she whispered. Lucas knelt beside her, his big hand cupping her face, forcing her to look at him. In the silver moonlight, his expression was fierce with determination. His mouth worked, struggling against years of silence, until finally, agonizingly, sound emerged. Your fault." Each word seemed torn from his throat, rough as sandpaper, but undeniably his voice. Amelia gasped, her hands flying to cover his. "Lucas, you're speaking." He winced at the effort, but continued, each word deliberate and hard one. Needed to tell you. Stay with me. The simple phrase delivered with such effort undid her completely. Amelia threw her arms around his neck, pressing her face against his shoulder as sobs shook her body. Lucas held her tightly, his own breath uneven against her hair. When she finally pulled back to look at him, she found his eyes wet with unshed tears. You're home, she said softly. Everything you had, single quotes. Lucas shook his head. Not everything. His hand drifted to her cheek, thumb brushing away the moisture there. Still have this. He touched his heart, then hers. A gesture so simple yet profound broke something open inside Amelia, barrier she hadn't realized she'd built. A final defense against allowing herself to truly belong somewhere, to someone. What do we do now? She asked. Lucas struggled to his feet, pulling her up with him. Neighbor's place, 5 miles east. Maxwell. Good man, single quotes. Each sentence seemed slightly easier than the last, as though his voice was remembering its purpose after years of disuse. They salvaged what little they could. Lucas's horse had escaped the barn, frightened but unharmed, and a cache of supplies he kept buried near the corral remained intact. As they prepared to leave, Amelia looked back one last time at the smoldering remains of the place that had briefly been her sanctuary. I'm not running anymore, she said firmly, as much to herself as to Lucas. Whatever comes next, I won't run from it. Or from you. Lucas studied her face in the moonlight, as if memorizing every detail. Then, with visible effort, he spoke the words that would sustain her through whatever trials lay ahead. Then we... face it... together. They rode double through the night, Amelia cradled in front of Lucas, his arms steady around her as he guided the horse across familiar terrain. The rhythm of hoofbeats and the warmth of his body against hers lulled her into an exhausted half-sleep. She drifted in and out of consciousness, aware only of his presence and the certainty that everything had changed between them. Dawn was breaking as they approached the Maxwell Ranch, a modest but well-maintained property nestled in a green valley. A tall, silver-haired man emerged from the house as they rode into the yard, his weathered face registering shock at their appearance. Blackwood? That you? Good Lord, man, what happened? Lucas dismounted carefully, helping Amelia down before turning to face his neighbor. When he spoke, the effort was visible, but the words came clearer than before. Need your help, John. Men came, burned my place, looking for her. Maxwell's sharp eyes took in Amelia's disheveled appearance, the soot on their clothes, the exhaustion etched into their faces. Without hesitation, he gestured toward the house. Come in, both of you. Martha, he called to his wife, put the coffee on and fix up the spare room. We've got company. As they crossed the threshold into the warmth of the Maxwell home, Amelia felt Lucas's hand find hers, their fingers intertwining in silent promise. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side. The silent rancher who had found his voice, and the runaway bride who had finally stopped running. The Maxwells proved to be exactly the allies Lucas and Amelia needed in their darkest hour. Martha Maxwell, a sturdy woman with kind eyes and capable hands, tended to Lucas's wounds while her husband John listened grimly to their story, or as much of it as Lucas could manage to tell with his still recovering voice. Hired guns burning out honest ranchers, John muttered, shaking his head in disgust. And all for what? To drag a grown woman back to some marriage she didn't choose? He looked at Amelia with unexpected gentleness. Well, miss, you're safe here for as long as you need. I can't thank you enough, Amelia said, cradling a cup of hot coffee between her palms. But I won't bring danger to your doorstep. Those men, they won't stop looking. Let them look, Martha declared, applying a salve to the gash above Lucas's eye. This isn't Boston, child. Out here we stand by our neighbors. Lucas winced as the medicine stung his wound, but his eyes remained fixed on Amelia. We need time, he meant it, each word slightly clearer than it had been the night before. Plan what's next, Single quotes. John nodded thoughtfully. Blackwood's right. Those men will be back, probably with reinforcements. Eastern money can buy a lot of trouble. Even out here, he stroked his silver beard. What you two need is the law on your side. The sheriff already came looking for me, Amelia reminded him. He had papers from my father. Tom Parker? John scoffed. He's a decent man, but his jurisdiction ends at the county line. I'm talking about federal law. He turned to Lucas. Remember Judge Wilson over in Laramie? The one who ruled in your favor during that water rights dispute with the railroad? Lucas nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. He's a fair man who doesn't take kindly to Eastern interests throwing their weight around out here. More importantly, he's got the authority to hear your case properly. John looked between them. If Miss Bennett here were to petition for protection from forced marriage, with evidence of these men's violence, do you really think a judge would side with me against my father? Amelia asked, hope and doubt warring in her voice. He's a powerful man with powerful friends. Out here we measure a man by his actions, not his connections, John replied firmly. Those men burned down a homestead and could have killed you both. That counts for something, even against Boston money. Martha finished bandaging Lucas's wound and patted his shoulder. You two get some rest now. Tomorrow's soon enough to make plans. They were shown to a small but clean bedroom at the back of the house. Amelia hesitated at the threshold, suddenly aware of the impropriety of their situation. Lucas sensed her discomfort and immediately turned to leave, but Martha intercepted him with remarkable perception. Nonsense, she said briskly. After what you've been through, true, neither of you should be alone, and I'm too old to care about what's proper when what's needed is a good night's sleep. She pressed fresh nightclothes into Amelia's hand. There's a screen in the corner if you want privacy to change. Now get some rest, both of you. Left alone, Amelia and Lucas regarded each other awkwardly across the width of the modest room. Despite everything they had shared, the fear, the flight, the tacit acknowledgement of feelings deeper than friendship, this new intimacy felt like crossing a boundary neither had prepared for. "I can sleep on the floor," Lucas offered, his voice a rough whisper, but the words coming more easily now. Amelia shook her head. "You're injured, and Martha's right, I don't want to be alone tonight." She gathered her courage. "The bed is large enough for both of us." They settled into an uneasy arrangement, both lying rigid at opposite edges of the mattress, careful not to touch. Exhaustion soon overcame propriety, however, and Amelia drifted into troubled sleep. She woke sometime in the darkest hour of night, disoriented and gripped by panic as memories of the burning house flooded back. A strangled cry escaped her before she could stop it. "Amelia." Lucas's voice came through the darkness, steady and reassuring. His hand found hers beneath the covers. "I'm here. We're safe." She turned toward him, seeking his warmth, her fear momentarily stronger than her sense of decorum. "I keep seeing the flames," she whispered, hearing those men. Lucas hesitated, then gently drew her against his chest, his arm creating a protective circle around her shoulder. "They won't hurt you," he promised, the words rumbling beneath her ear. "Not while I breathe." In the safe harbor of his embrace, Amelia felt her terror recede. They lay together in the darkness, heartbeats gradually synchronizing, breath mingling in the narrow space between them. It was the most intimate moment of Amelia's life, yet there was nothing improper in it, just two souls finding comfort in each other after shared trauma. "Lucas," she murmured, half asleep again. "Why did you start speaking now after all this time?" His chest rose and fell beneath her cheek as he considered the question. When he finally answered, his voice was clearer than it had been since he'd broken his silence. "Some things, worth finding your voice for." Morning brought clarity and purpose. Over a hearty breakfast, they discussed their options with the Maxwells. John had already sent a trusted ranch hand to Laramie with a message for Judge Wilson, explaining the situation and requesting an urgent meeting. "The judge is a busy man, but he'll see you," John assured. "Meanwhile, you're welcome to stay here, though I reckon those men will come looking eventually. We need to be prepared when they do." Martha added, pouring more coffee. "I've sent word to the neighbors, Langstrom, Peterson, the Wilcox brothers. They'll all keep an eye out for strangers asking questions." Amelia was touched by the quick rallying of support from people who barely knew her. "I don't know how to repay such kindness." "No need," John said gruffly. "Blackwood here would do the same for any of us." He glanced at Lucas. "Speaking of which, we ought to ride out to your place, see if anything can be salvaged." Lucas nodded, his jaw set with determination. "Need to ... rebuild. Start again." "You can't possibly be thinking of going back there now," Amelia protested. "Those men could return at any moment." "My home," Lucas said simply, each word still an effort but delivered with unmistakable resolve. "Won't be driven off ... My land ... Fingal quotes." John clapped him on the shoulder. "That's the spirit. Besides, showing those Eastern thugs they didn't break you is the best response." He turned to Amelia. "Don't worry. We'll be careful. Martha and her shotgun will keep you company." After the men departed, Amelia helped Martha with household chores, finding comfort in the simple, practical tasks. The older woman worked beside her in companionable silence for a while before speaking. "How long have you loved him?" The question, posed so directly, caught Amelia completely off guard. What makes you think?" Martha's knowing smile stopped her protests. "Child, I've been married 43 years. I know the look of a woman in love," she continued, kneading bread dough, "and the look of a man who's found something worth fighting for." Amelia's hand stilled on the shirt she was mending, one of John, donated to replace Lucas's soot-stained clothing. "It happened so gradually I didn't realize until the house was burning," she admitted. "Seeing him willing to lose everything to protect me ... And does he know?" "We haven't spoken of it directly," Amelia confessed. "Everything has happened so quickly." Martha nodded thoughtfully. "Well, sometimes words are overrated, especially with men like Lucas, who've learned to live without them." She shaped the dough into a loaf with practiced motions. "But take it from an old woman, don't wait too long to tell him. Life out here can be short and brutal. When you find love, you grab it with both hands." Amelia considered this wisdom as she continued her mending. In Boston, romantic attachments were carefully choreographed affairs, proceeding according to strict social protocols. But here in Wyoming territory, with danger at their heels and the future uncertain, such conventions seemed trivial. "I'll tell him," she promised, as much to herself as to Martha, "when the time is right." The men returned at dusk, tired and soot-stained, but bringing unexpected good news. "The fire wasn't as destructive as we feared," John reported as they washed up for dinner. "Main structure's gone, but the barn's mostly intact. Foundation's sound too. With help, Blackwood could rebuild before winter." Lucas nodded, his expression brightening as he looked at Amelia. "Found something. For you." From his pocket, he withdrew a small object and placed it gently in her palm. It was the photograph from the mantel, miraculously spared from the flames, though the edges were singed and the frame destroyed. "Oh, Lucas," Amelia breathed, understanding the significance of what he had salvaged. "Your family ... Single quotes." He shook his head, carefully closing her fingers around the photograph. "For you ... to keep." His eyes held hers steadily. "My past. Safe with you." In that moment, with the weight of his trust in her hands, Amelia knew that Martha was right. Some things couldn't wait for the perfect moment. Some truths needed to be spoken while there was still time. The Maxwell's ranch hand returned from Laramie 2 days later, bringing word that Judge Wilson would see them the following week. It was both a relief and a new source of anxiety. They had a chance at legal protection, but first they had to reach Laramie safely, a journey of nearly 60 miles through open country where they would be vulnerable to ambush. "We'll take the northern route," John decided, spreading a rough map across the kitchen table. "It's longer but less traveled, fewer places for an ambush." Lucas traced the proposed path with his finger, his brow furrowed in concentration. His voice, growing stronger with each passing day, still emerged in carefully measured words. "Need more ... than just us. Too risky." John nodded grimly. "Already thought of that. Wilcox's boys have agreed to ride with us. Peterson too. 5 armed men should discourage any hired guns from trying anything too bold." Amelia studied the map, the magnitude of what they were undertaking settling over her like a heavy blanket. "And if the judge rules against us? If he sides with my father?" The question hung in the air, giving voice to the fear they had all carefully avoided. Martha was the one who finally answered, her practical nature cutting through the uncertainty. "Then you keep moving west," she said simply. "California, Oregon, Washington territory. Somewhere your father's reach doesn't extend." She patted Amelia's hand. "But let's not borrow trouble. Judge Wilson is a fair man." That evening, Amelia sat on the Maxwell's porch, watching the sunset paint the distant mountains in shades of gold and crimson. The beauty of this wild country still took her breath away, so different from the manicured gardens and crowded streets of Boston. Out here, everything felt more immediate, more essential, including her feelings for the man who now eased himself onto the step beside her. Lucas offered her a cup of coffee, which she accepted gratefully. The nights were growing cooler as autumn approached, and the warm beverage was a comfort against the chill. "Beautiful," he said, nodding toward the sunset. His voice was gaining strength daily, though he still chose his words with careful economy. "It is," Amelia agreed. "I never imagined such colors existed in nature. In Boston, everything seems ... muted by comparison." Lucas studied her profile, his gaze lingering on the curve of her cheek, the wisp of hair that had escaped her braid. "Not going back there," he said, a statement rather than a question. Amelia shook her head firmly. "Never. Even if the judge rules in our favor, I can't imagine returning to that life." She turned to face him directly. "But what about you? What happens after ... all this?" He considered her question, his amber eyes reflecting the dying light. "Rebuild. Start over." He hesitated, then added softly, "Not alone this time, if you want." The simple invitation, for it was unmistakably, that sent warmth cascading through Amelia's body that had nothing to do with the coffee. This was what Martha had meant about grabbing love with both hands when you found it. "Lucas," she began, gathering her courage, "I need to tell you." The sound of approaching horses interrupted her confession. Multiple riders, moving fast. Lucas was on his feet instantly, pushing Amelia behind him as John emerged from the house with a rifle. "Get inside," Lucas ordered, his voice sharp with urgency. But it was too late for retreat. 6 riders thundered into the yard, surrounding the house with practiced efficiency. Amelia's heart sank as she recognized the lead rider, James Hughes, her father's emissary, accompanied now by 5 hard-faced men whose hands rested casually on holstered weapons. "Miss Bennett," Hughes called, tipping his hat with mock courtesy. "Your father was most distressed to learn about the unfortunate incident at Mr. Blackwood's ranch. He sent me personally to ensure your safe return to Boston." "Safe return?" Amelia stepped forward, anger overcoming fear. "Is that what you call burning down a man's home? Shooting at us?" Hughes had the grace to look uncomfortable. "A regrettable misunderstanding. The men previously employed were overzealous in their methods. I assure you, we mean no harm now." His gaze shifted to Lucas. "Mr. Blackwood, I believe? You've put yourself at considerable risk for a woman you barely know." Lucas said nothing, but his stance remained protective, his body a shield between Amelia and potential danger. John Maxwell raised his rifle slightly. "You're trespassing on private property, mister. I suggest you state your business plainly or move along." Hughes sighed, as if dealing with particularly dim-witted children. "Very well. I have legal documents signed by Judge Carmichael of the Massachusetts Superior Court, granting guardianship of Miss Bennett to her father until such time as she fulfills her contractual obligation to marry." He withdrew an official-looking paper from his coat. "Additionally, I have a warrant for the arrest of Lucas Blackwood on charges of kidnapping and obstruction of justice." "That's absurd," Amelia cried. "I wasn't kidnapped. I ran away of my own free will." "A distinction without difference in the eyes of the law, I'm afraid," replied smoothly. "A woman in your position isn't considered capable of making such decisions independently." The casual dismissal of her agency, so reminiscent of her father's attitude, ignited something fierce within Amelia. She moved to stand shoulder to shoulder with Lucas, no longer willing to be protected. "I am perfectly capable of deciding my own future, mister, and I have decided not to return to Boston, not to marry Judge Carmichael, and certainly not to obey my father's dictates any longer." Hughes's expression hardened. "I'd hoped to resolve this amicably, Miss Bennett, but you leave me no choice." He gestured to his men. "Secure the girl. Arrest Blackwood." 2 riders dismounted, moving purposefully toward the porch. Before they could reach the steps, however, the distinct sound of rifles being cocked echoed from multiple directions. From the barn, the bunkhouse, and the corral emerged half a dozen ranch hands, all armed and aiming directly at Hughes's party. Martha appeared in the doorway, shotgun braced against her shoulder. "I believe you're outnumbered, sir," she observed calmly. Hughes surveyed the situation, clearly reassessing his options. After a tense moment, he folded the papers and returned them to his pocket. "This isn't over," he warned. "You can't hide forever, Miss Bennett. And you," he addressed Lucas with undisguised contempt, "would be wise to consider what you're risking for a woman who brings nothing but trouble." Lucas's response was immediate and unequivocal. "Worth it," he said simply. The declaration, spoken with such certainty, sent a tremor through Amelia's heart. Hughes's men retreated slowly, maintaining wary eyes on the armed ranch hands until they disappeared down the road in a cloud of dust. "They'll be back," John stated grimly, lowering his rifle. "And next time they'll bring more men." "Then we need to leave for Laramie tonight," Amelia decided. "We can't put your family at risk any longer." Lucas nodded his agreement, his eyes never leaving her face. In them she read determination, concern, and something deeper that gave her courage for what lay ahead. Within the hour, they were prepared to depart. The Wilcox brothers and Peterson had arrived as promised, grim-faced men with weathered skin and steady hands who asked no questions but simply nodded their understanding of the situation. Martha embraced Amelia tightly. "Remember what I told you," she whispered. "Don't wait too long to speak your heart." Amelia returned the embrace, grateful beyond words for this woman's strength and wisdom. "I won't," she promised. As they mounted their horses, the night air crisp with approaching autumn, Amelia felt a curious sense of clarity descend upon her. The path ahead was fraught with danger, the outcome uncertain, yet she had never been more sure of her course. She glanced at Lucas, who rode beside her, his profile strong against the star-filled sky. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The silent rancher who had found his voice and the runaway bride who had found her courage. With John Maxwell leading the way, they set off toward Laramie, toward judgment, toward whatever future awaited them beyond the darkness. They traveled through the night, keeping to lesser-known trails that wound through shadowed valleys and dense stands of pine. The moon, a silver crescent above the mountains, provided just enough light to navigate, but not enough to expose their position to any pursuers. No one spoke unless necessary. Even the horses seemed to understand the need for stealth, their hoofbeats muffled against the soft earth. Amelia rode between Lucas and John, with the Wilcox brothers scouting ahead and Peterson guarding their rear. Though her body ached from the unaccustomed hours in the saddle, she made no complaint. The discomfort was a small price for freedom. Near dawn, they made camp in a sheltered ravine where a clear stream provided water for both horses and riders. While the men established a perimeter, Amelia gathered kindling for a small, smokeless fire over which John brewed strong coffee. "We'll rest here for a few hours," John decided, passing cups of the steaming liquid around. "Continue at midday when the sun's high. Harder to be tracked then." Lucas, who had spoken little during their journey, settled beside Amelia on a fallen log. His voice, when he finally used it, was low and private, meant for her ears alone. "How are you holding up?" She offered him a tired smile. "Better than I expected, though I fear I'll be walking bow-legged for days." The slight quirk of his lips, almost a smile, warmed her more than the coffee. "You're stronger than you know," he said, the words coming easier now, flowing more naturally than they had just days before. "I'm learning to be," she acknowledged. "Thanks to you." He shook his head slightly. "It was always there. Just needed ... the right circumstances." Their eyes held for a long moment, unspoken feelings passing between them with an intensity that made Amelia's breath catch. She was acutely aware of the others nearby, of the impropriety of what she longed to reach for him, close the small distance between them, feel the safety of his arms around her again. Instead, she asked a question that had lingered in her mind since the confrontation at the Maxwells. "Did you mean what you said to Hughes, that I was worth the risk?" Lucas didn't hesitate. "Every word. But you've lost so much because of me." "Your home, buildings," he interrupted gently. "Just buildings. Can be rebuilt." His hand moved to cover hers where it rested on the log between them. "Some things matter more." The warmth of his calloused palm against her skin sent a flutter through Amelia's chest. She turned her hand beneath his, their fingers intertwining with natural ease, as if they had been doing this for years rather than mere moments. "I was trying to tell you something," she began, remembering their interrupted conversation on the Maxwell's porch. "Before Hughes arrived, I wanted to say..." The sharp whistle from the ridge above cut her off, one of the Wilcox brothers signaling danger. Instantly, Lucas was on his feet, pulling Amelia up with him. "Riders coming," John announced tersely. 6, maybe 7, moving fast. "Hughes?" Amelia asked, fear tightening her throat. "Can't tell, but we can't risk assuming otherwise." John began kicking dirt over their small fire. "Mount up. We'll take the canyon trail." Within minutes, they were moving again, this time at a faster pace. The canyon trail proved to be little more than a narrow deer path that zigzagged down a steep, rocky slope. Amelia's heart pounded as her mount picked its way carefully over loose shale and between jutting boulders. Lucas rode just ahead, occasionally glancing back to ensure she was managing the treacherous descent. The concern in his eyes gave her courage to keep going when her nerves threatened to overwhelm her. At the canyon floor, they increased their pace, following a dry riverbed that offered concealment from the ridges above. Hours passed in tense silence, broken only by the occasional whispered consultation between John and the scouts. By late afternoon, they had seen no further sign of pursuit, and John finally called a halt in a secluded clearing surrounded by cottonwood trees. A small spring bubbled from between moss-covered rocks, providing welcome refreshment. We'll rest the horses properly this time, he decided. Cook a hot meal. We've made good progress, should reach Laramie by noon tomorrow if we start at first light. The atmosphere in the camp lightened somewhat as they prepared a simple supper of beans and salt pork. Even the taciturn Wilcox brothers unbent enough to share a flask of whiskey, the harsh liquor burning a trail of warmth through chilled bodies. As twilight deepened into true darkness, they arranged watches for the night. Lucas volunteered for the first shift, positioning himself on a fallen tree with clear sight lines to all approaches. Amelia spread her bedroll nearby, close enough to speak softly without disturbing the others who were already settling down to sleep. "Lucas," she called quietly, "may I join you? I don't think I could sleep just yet." He nodded, making room for her on the broad trunk. They sat in companionable silence for a while, watching as stars appeared one by one in the deepening indigo sky. "Tell me about your life," Amelia requested finally. "Before... everything happened. What was it like?" Lucas was quiet for so long that she thought he might not answer. When he did, his voice carried the weight of memories long suppressed. "Simple. Good." He paused, gathering words that came with increasing fluency. "Rebecca and I built the ranch from nothing. Worked the land, raised cattle. When Thomas was born... single quotes. He swallowed hard. Happiest day of my life." Amelia waited, giving him space to continue at his own pace. "She loved wildflowers," he said suddenly. "Rebecca planted them everywhere, yellow ones mostly. Said they looked like little suns." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Thomas had her laugh. Big, full, no holding back. "They sound wonderful," Amelia said softly. Lucas nodded, his gaze fixed on some distant point beyond the present. "They were my world. I'm so sorry for what happened to them," she whispered. "Carried the grief like a stone," he continued, as if needing to speak the words now that he had begun. "For 3 years, couldn't talk about them, couldn't talk at all." He turned to look at her directly. "Then you came, soaking wet in that torn dress. Scared but standing your ground." "I was terrified," Amelia admitted. "I had no idea what would happen." "Changed everything," Lucas said simply. "Made me remember there was more to life than surviving." His hand found hers in the darkness. "Made me want to speak again." The confession, delivered with such raw honesty, moved Amelia deeply. She leaned against his shoulder, drawing strength from his solid presence. "I've never told anyone this," she began hesitantly. "But the day I ran from the church, I wasn't just running away from the judge. I was running away from a life where I was nothing but a possession to be traded, a life without love or purpose or choice." She looked up at him, finding his eyes in the starlight. "I never expected to find all three with a silent rancher in Wyoming territory." Lucas's breath caught audibly. His free hand rose to her cheek, calloused fingers impossibly gentle against her skin. "Amelia," he said, her name a prayer on his lips. The distance between them vanished as he lowered his head, his mouth finding hers with tender certainty. The kiss was everything Amelia had never dared to imagine, warm and safe yet thrilling in its newness. A promise and a fulfillment all at once. When they finally parted, breathless and wondering, Lucas rested his forehead against hers. "Been wanting to do that since you wore my shirt that first morning," he confessed. Amelia laughed softly, joy bubbling up unexpectedly in the midst of their perilous circumstances. "I've been wanting you to since then too." His arms encircled her, drawing her close against the night's chill. In this embrace, with danger still lurking and their future uncertain, Amelia found a peace she had never known in all her years of privileged safety in Boston. "Whatever happens in Laramie," she whispered against his chest. "Whatever the judge decides, I won't let them separate us." Lucas pressed a kiss to the top of her head. "Not going to happen," he assured her with quiet conviction. "Found you, not letting go." In the darkness, with the whisper of leaves overhead and the distant call of a night bird, those simple words felt like the strongest vow any man had ever made to any woman. Morning arrived with golden light filtering through the cottonwoods and the promise of clear skies for their final push to Laramie. Amelia woke feeling more rested than she had any right to expect, given their circumstances. The memory of Lucas's kiss lingered like a talisman against fear, strengthening her for whatever lay ahead. They broke camp efficiently, the routine now familiar. As Amelia helped gather their supplies, she caught Lucas watching her, his expression softened by something that made her heart flutter. When their eyes met, he didn't look away but offered a small, private smile that spoke volumes more than words ever could. John Maxwell studied their map one last time before mounting. "Should be in Laramie by midday if we keep a steady pace. Judge Wilson's expecting us this afternoon." "Any sign of Hughes and his men?" Peterson asked, scanning the ridgeline with practiced eyes. "Nothing since yesterday," one of the Wilcox brothers reported. "Could mean they've given up. More likely means they're waiting somewhere ahead." Lucas moved to stand beside Amelia, his hand briefly touching the small of her back, a gesture of reassurance that didn't escape John's notice. The older man cleared his throat. addressing them both. "I've been thinking," he began, somewhat awkwardly, "about your situation. Seems to me the simplest solution might be to make this arrangement official before we see the judge." Amelia blinked in confusion. "Official? I don't understand." "He means marriage," Lucas clarified, his voice steady but his eyes searching hers carefully. "If we were married, your father's claim would be weakened considerably." "Exactly," John nodded. "No judge would force a legally married woman back to her father, especially not out here where women's rights are more practical than back east." Heat rose in Amelia's cheeks as she processed the suggestion. Married to Lucas. The idea both thrilled and terrified her. What had begun as an impulsive escape had evolved into feelings deeper than she'd ever experienced. But marriage was a monumental step. I hadn't thought, single quotes, she stammered, suddenly aware of everyone's eyes upon her. Lucas took her hand gently, leading her a few steps away from the others. When they were out of earshot, he spoke softly, his voice more fluid than she had yet heard it. "Not how I would have chosen to ask," he said wryly. "John means well, but he's about as subtle as a stampeding buffalo." His expression grew serious. "This isn't just strategy, Amelia. At least not for me." "What is it then?" she asked, needing to hear him say it. Lucas took a deep breath. "A beginning. Something I never thought I'd have again." His hands, work-roughened but infinitely gentle, cradled hers. "I love you. Have almost since you showed up on my porch in that torn wedding dress, looking like a half-drowned cat, but too proud to admit it." A startled laugh escaped her at the unexpected description. "Is that really how you saw me?" "At first," he admitted, the corner of his mouth quirking upwards. "Then I saw your courage, your kindness, the way you faced each day like it was a gift, not a burden." His thumb traced circles on her palm. "You brought life back to my ranch. Back to me." Single quotes. Tears welled in Amelia's eyes, but they were born of joy, not sorrow. "I love you too," she whispered. "Think I have for weeks, but I was too afraid to admit it, even to myself." Relief and happiness transformed Lucas's face, erasing years of solitude in an instant. "Then marry me," he said simply. "Not for the judge or your father or anyone else, just for us." In that moment, with morning sunlight dappling his face and sincerity shining in his amber eyes, Amelia couldn't imagine any other answer. "Yes," she breathed. "Yes, Samora and companions received the news with varying degrees of enthusiasm, open delight from John, approving nods from the Wilcox brothers, and a grudging about time from Peterson. Plans were quickly adjusted to include a stop at the small church on the outskirts of Laramie before their meeting with the judge. They rode with renewed purpose, Amelia's thoughts alternating between nervous anticipation of their upcoming legal battle and wonderment at the unexpected turn her life had taken. 2 months ago, she had been preparing to marry a man she feared. Now she was riding toward a marriage to a man she loved beyond reason, a man who had risked everything to protect her. The irony wasn't lost on her. "Penny for your thoughts," Lucas said, guiding his horse alongside hers as they crossed a wide meadow blooming with late summer wildflowers. "I was just thinking how strange life is," she replied. "If I hadn't run away that day, if I hadn't gotten caught in that storm, if I hadn't found your ranch, single quotes." She shook her head in wonder. "So many chances for our paths never to have crossed, but they did," he reminded her, reaching across to squeeze her hand briefly. "They did," she agreed, warmth suffusing her at his touch. Their moment of connection was shattered by a sharp crack from the tree line ahead, unmistakably a rifle shot. John's horse reared in panic as a bullet kicked up dirt just inches from its hooves. "Ambush!" Peterson shouted, already drawing his weapon. Lucas reacted instantly, grabbing Amelia's reins and pulling both their horses behind the shelter of a massive boulder. The others scattered, seeking cover while returning fire toward the unseen attackers. "Stay down," Lucas ordered, dismounting and drawing his rifle in one fluid motion. He positioned himself at the edge of the boulder, scanning the tree line. "How many?" John called from behind a fallen log 20 yards away. "Can't tell," one of the Wilcox brothers answered. "At least 4, maybe more." Single quotes, another volley of shots peppered their position. Amelia pressed herself against the cold stone, heart hammering in her chest. This was no warning like at the ranch. These men were shooting to kill. "It's Hughes," she whispered to Lucas. "He must have guessed we'd take this route to Laramie." Lucas nodded grimly. "Been tracking us since the Maxwells, waiting for the right spot." He risked a quick glance around the boulder, ducking back as a bullet chipped stone near his head. "They've got us pinned. Clear shot at the meadow if we try to run." "What do we do?" Amelia asked, struggling to keep her voice steady. Before Lucas could answer, a voice called from the trees. "Miss Bennett, Mr. Blackwood, this can end peacefully if you surrender now." James Hughes. His cultured Boston accent sounded absurdly out of place in this wild setting. "M.R. Hughes," Amelia called back, ignoring Lucas's attempt to silence her. "This has gone far enough. Your men are committing assault with deadly weapons. No court will support you after this. I have legal documents granting me authority to retrieve you by any means necessary," Hughes replied coolly. "Your father was quite thorough in his preparations." As for Blackwood and his friends, they're interfering with a lawful recovery of property. The law is entirely on my side. Property? Amelia echoed, fury replacing fear. Is that what I am to my father? A possession to be retrieved? Essentially, yes, Hughes confirmed without a hint of shame. Now I'll give you one chance to come out voluntarily. Otherwise, I cannot guarantee the safety of your companions. Lucas's jaw tightened, his knuckles white around his rifle. Don't even think about it, he growled, correctly reading her thoughts. Can't let anyone else die for me, Amelia whispered fiercely. First your home, now this. It has to stop. Together, Lucas reminded her, his eyes intense. We face this together. Remember? Another barrage of bullets struck around them. Closer this time. One of the Wilcox brothers cried out in pain. You have 1 minute to decide, Miss Bennett, Hughes called. After that, my men have orders to shoot anything that moves. John caught Lucas's eye from his position, making a series of hand signals that Amelia couldn't decipher. Lucas nodded once, then turned to her. Listen carefully, he said, his voice low and urgent. When I give the signal, you run for those trees to the south. Don't stop, don't look back. John and the others will provide covering fire. What about you? She demanded, clutching his arm. Lucas's expression softened momentarily. I'll be right behind, promise. He pressed a swift, hard kiss to her lips. Go on, my mark. Ready? Before she could protest further, Lucas turned and fired 3 rapid shots toward the ambushers. Now, he shouted, and Amelia ran, her heart in her throat, praying that the next bullet wouldn't find her, or the man she loved. Amelia ran as she had never run before, her lungs burning and her skirts tangling around her legs with every desperate stride. Gunfire erupted behind her in a deafening exchange, John and the others providing covering fire as promised. She didn't dare look back, focusing only on the distant tree line that promised shelter, praying that Lucas was following as he'd sworn. A bullet whizzed past her ear, so close she felt the air disturbed by its passing. Another kicked up dirt at her feet. She zigzagged instinctively, making herself a more difficult target, though every change of direction cost precious seconds. Just as the trees seemed within reach, her foot caught in a prairie dog hole concealed by tall grass. She pitched forward with a cry of pain, her ankle twisting beneath her. The fall saved her life. A bullet passed through the space where her head had been a moment before, embedding itself in a tree trunk ahead. Unable to stand, Amelia began to crawl, dragging herself through the grass on elbows and knees, ignoring the stabbing pain in her ankle. She could hear shouts behind her, Hughes ordering his men to pursue, John yelling something unintelligible in response. Then the thunder of hoofbeats approaching fast. A horse loomed above her suddenly, and strong hands reached down to seize her. For one terrified moment, she thought Hughes's men had caught her. Then she recognized Peterson's weathered face as he hauled her bodily onto his saddle. Hold tight, he ordered, wheeling his mount toward the trees. Amelia clung to him as they galloped across the remaining open ground, bullets striking all around them. Quote, they plunged into the forest's relative safety, Peterson navigating between trees with reckless skill. Only when they were deep within the woods did he finally slow, allowing Amelia to catch her breath and take stock of their situation. The others? She gasped, twisting to look back the way they had come. Wilcox brothers are providing rearguard, Peterson explained tersely. John was hit, but not bad flesh wound to the arm. He and Blackwood were right behind me. Lucas is coming? Relief washed through her. Peterson nodded. Told me to get you to safety first. Man's half crazy with worry for you. He glanced down at her. You hurt? My ankle, Amelia admitted. I fell. He grunted in acknowledgement, guiding his horse toward the sound of running water. Creek ahead. We'll stop there. Wait for the others. The small stream provided both cover and comfort over hanging trees, concealed them while the gurgling water masked small sounds, and offered blessed relief for Amelia's swollen ankle. Peterson helped her dismount, then positioned himself where he could watch their back trail while she bathed her injury in the cold current. Minutes stretched into an hour with no sign of the others. Amelia's anxiety grew with each passing moment, imagining the worst: Lucas captured or wounded, perhaps even killed. Something's wrong, she said finally, unable to bear the waiting any longer. They should have been here by now. Peterson's weathered face betrayed nothing, but his silence was answer enough. He was worried too. We need to go back, Amelia insisted, struggling to her feet despite the pain. They might need help. My orders were to get you to safety, Peterson countered. Blackwood was clear about that. And my decision is to find him, she retorted, her voice steady despite her fear. I won't leave him behind. Peterson studied her for a long moment, then sighed heavily. Stubborn as he is, no wonder you two found each other. He helped her back onto his horse. But we do this smart. No charging in without knowing what we're facing. They backtracked cautiously, Peterson leading the horse on foot to minimize noise. As they approached the edge of the forest, he signaled for silence, then crept forward to survey the meadow where the ambush had occurred. Amelia held her breath, watching his face for any sign of what he saw. When he turned back to her, his expression was grim. Hughes's men are gone, he reported, but there's someone down down in the meadow. Can't tell who from here. Fear clutched at Amelia's heart. Without waiting for Peterson's assistance, she slid from the saddle, ignoring the jolt of pain when her injured ankle hit the ground. She limped toward the forest edge, determined to see for herself. The meadow, so peaceful earlier, now resembled a battlefield. The grass was trampled and torn by horses and men. Near the center, a dark shape lay ominously still. "Lucas," Amelia whispered, her voice breaking on his name. Before Peterson could stop her, she was moving across the open ground, heedless of potential danger, focused only on reaching the motionless figure. As she drew closer, details emerged that sent waves of relief and fresh horror through her. Not Lucas, but one of Hughes's men, his chest a bloody ruin. Beyond him lay another body, and beyond that, nothing but empty meadows stretching to the distant tree line. Peterson caught up to her, rifle ready as he scanned for threats. No sign of the others, he muttered. Could mean they got away, or they've been taken, Amelia finished, cold certainty settling over her. Hughes has them. Peterson didn't contradict her. He knelt beside the nearest body, checking for signs of life and finding none. These men worked for Hughes, he confirmed, recognized them from the ranch. He'll take them to Laramie, Amelia reasoned, her mind racing despite her fear. He wants to present his case to the judge. What better way than to bring Lucas in as his prisoner? He'll claim Lucas kidnapped me. Use the warrant he mentioned. Peterson nodded slowly. Makes sense. Hughes doesn't strike me as the type to execute prisoners if he can use them legally instead. Then we still have time, Amelia said, newfound determination strengthening her voice. How far are we from Laramie? 10 miles, maybe less. Single quotes. Peterson glanced at the sun's position. Could make it by nightfall if we push. Then we pushed, she decided. We need to reach Judge Wilson before Hughes presents his version of events. You're in no condition to ride hard, Peterson objected, eyeing her swollen ankle. Amelia straightened, ignoring the pain that shot up her leg. Watch me. Something like respect flickered in the weathered cowhand's eyes. He helped her mount, then swung up behind her. Hold tight then. We're riding straight through. The journey was agony for Amelia's injured ankle, each hoofbeat sending fresh stabs of pain through her leg. She endured without complaint, focusing instead on what awaited in Laramie and what she would need to do once they arrived. As the sun began its descent toward the western mountains, the town finally came into view, a collection of wooden buildings straddling the railroad tracks, with a church spire rising above the rest. Under different circumstances, Amelia might have appreciated the irony that they were still making their planned stop at the church, though not for the wedding they had anticipated. Judge Wilson's office is above the Mercantile, Peterson informed her as they approached the town limits. But if Hughes has arrived already, he might have taken them to the jail. The jail, Amelia echoed, her stomach nodding at the thought of Lucas behind bars. Would the sheriff just accept Hughes's word? Peterson's expression darkened. Depends on the sheriff. Some out here are more impressed by Eastern money than frontier justice. They rode directly to the jailhouse, a squat stone building with barred windows and a heavy wooden door. Peterson helped Amelia dismount, supporting her weight as she limped up the steps. Inside, they found confirmation of their fears. The local sheriff stood in conversation with James Hughes, while in the cells beyond, Lucas, John, and the Wilcox brothers sat in grim silence. Lucas's head snapped up at Amelia's entrance, relief and warning warring in his expression. Miss Bennett Hughes greeted her with smug satisfaction. How convenient of you to join us. I was just explaining to Sheriff Davis how these men abducted you from your rightful guardian. That's a lie, Amelia declared, her voice ringing with authority that surprised even her. And I can prove it. All eyes turned to her, Hughes calculating. The sheriff wary. Lucas's filled with a fierce pride that strengthened her resolve. In that moment, Amelia felt the full weight of her Boston upbringing. The education, the social training, the understanding of legal matters gleaned from years of listening to her father's business discussions. For the first time since she'd fled that church in Boston, she was grateful for her privileged background. It had prepared her for this moment, this battle of wits and words. Sheriff, she said, straightening despite her pain, I need to see Judge Wilson immediately. I have evidence that will expose Mr. Hughes for the criminal he truly is. Judge Ezekiel Wilson was not what Amelia had expected. Rather than the stern, imposing figure she had imagined, she found herself facing a slender man with kind eyes and a thoughtful demeanor. His office above the Mercantile was lined with leather-bound law books and smelled of pipe tobacco and old paper. The sheriff had reluctantly agreed to bring all parties before the judge immediately, though Hughes had protested vehemently. Now they stood arranged around the judge's modest chamber. Hughes, seething with barely contained fury. Lucas and the others still in handcuffs. Peterson standing protectively near Amelia, who had refused to sit despite her throbbing ankle. This is highly irregular, Your Honor, Hughes began, his Boston accent more pronounced in his agitation. These men should remain in custody while I present the legal documents from Judge Carmichael. I'll determine what's irregular in my courtroom. Mr. Hughes, Judge Wilson interrupted mildly, adjusting his spectacles, or my office as the case may be. He turned to Amelia. Young lady, you claim to have evidence that would clarify this situation. I'm listening. Amelia took a steadying breath. Your Honor, my name is Amelia Bennett. I'm 20 years of age, sound of mind, and until 2 months ago I was a resident of Boston, Massachusetts. She spoke clearly, drawing on every lesson in elocution her mother had forced upon her. Mr. Hughes represents my father, Edward Bennett, who arranged for me to marry Judge Harold Carmichael against my wishes. You were contractually obligated, Hughes interjected. Your father signed binding agreements. My father signed them, Amelia emphasized, turning to face him directly. I did not. No court in this country recognizes the right of a father to sell his adult daughter into marriage without her consent. Judge Wilson's eyebrows rose slightly. Sell, Miss Bennett? That's a serious accusation, and an accurate one. Your Honor, my father's bank was failing due to his poor investments. Judge Carmichael agreed to provide financial support in exchange for my hand in marriage. I was informed of this arrangement 1 week before the wedding. Her voice remained steady, though the memory still stung. When I objected, I was told my opinion was irrelevant. So you fled, the judge concluded. Yes, Your Honor. I left Boston with nothing but the clothes on my back. I traveled west by whatever means I could find, eventually becoming lost during a storm. Here, she glanced at Lucas, drawing strength from his unwavering gaze. Mr. Blackwood found me and offered shelter. He has shown me nothing but kindness and respect, Hughes scoffed. The convenient story. But it doesn't negate the legal authority granted to me by Judge Carmichael. Are you referring to this? Judge Wilson held up the papers Hughes had presented earlier. I've reviewed them carefully, Mr. Hughes. While they are impressively worded, they hold no legal weight in Wyoming territory. Judge Carmichael has no jurisdiction here, but the agreement is between Miss Bennett and Judge Carmichael, Wilson stated firmly. Miss Bennett is not property to be transferred by contract, regardless of what practices may be tolerated in Boston society. He set the papers aside with evident distaste. Furthermore, your methods in pursuing Miss Bennett are troubling, to say the least. I've received telegrams from 3 counties reporting gunfire, arson, and intimidation by men claiming to work for you. Hughes paled slightly but maintained his composure. We were met with armed resistance, Your Honor. My men were simply defending themselves. Is that so? The judge turned to Lucas. Mr. Blackwood, you've been notably silent. Would you care to offer your perspective? All eyes turned to Lucas as he stepped forward, his manacled hands held steady before him. When he spoke, his voice was clear and measured, each word chosen with care. Hughes's men burned my ranch to the ground, Your Honor, shot at us without warning, ambushed us on the trail to Laramie. His eyes never left the judge's face. We defended ourselves. Nothing more. He can't be considered a reliable witness, Hughes protested. He's clearly infatuated with the girl. His judgment is compromised. Not infatuated, Lucas corrected quietly. In love, there's a difference. The simple declaration hung in the air, powerful in its honesty. Amelia's heart swelled at the public acknowledgement of what had grown between them. Judge Wilson studied Lucas thoughtfully. Sheriff, remove those handcuffs from her. Blackwood is not a criminal, Your Honor, Hughes exclaimed. I must protest. You've done quite enough protesting for one day, Mr. Hughes, the judge said sharply. In fact, I believe I have sufficient cause to detain you pending an investigation into the actions of your hired men. Sheriff, please escort Mem. Hughes to a cell while I consider the appropriate charges. As Hughes was led away, sputtering threats of legal repercussions, Judge Wilson turned his attention back to Amelia and Lucas. Miss Bennett, the law is clear. As an adult woman, you cannot be forced into marriage against your will, nor compelled to return to your father's household. He folded his hands on his desk. However, your situation remains precarious. Mr. Blackwood's ranch has been destroyed, and your father is unlikely to abandon his efforts, especially given his financial motivations, Your Honor, John Maxwell spoke up, rubbing his wrists where the handcuffs had been. The ranching community takes care of its own. We'll help Blackwood rebuild. As for Miss Bennett's security, single quotes, he glanced between Lucas and Amelia with a knowing smile. I believe they had plans to address that before we were interrupted. Judge Wilson raised an eyebrow. Is that so? Amelia felt heat rise in her cheeks, but her voice remained steady. Lucas asked me to marry him, Your Honor. I accepted. Out of necessity or affection? The judge inquired, though his eyes suggested he already knew the answer. Both, Lucas answered before she could. Started with protection, grew into something more. He turned to face Amelia fully. Something worth fighting for, worth living for, single quotes. Judge Wilson nodded slowly. Well then, I see no reason to delay. If you're both willing, I'm authorized to perform the ceremony right here and now. It would certainly strengthen your legal position, Miss Bennett. Amelia, she corrected gently. And yes, we're willing. What followed was not the wedding Amelia had once envisioned as a young girl dreaming in her Boston bedroom. There were no elaborate decorations, no satin gown, no society guests watching with calculated smiles. Instead, there was only a simple office, witnessed by loyal friends who had risked their lives to protect her, and the man she loved standing before her with wonder in his amber eyes. Judge Wilson spoke the traditional words with dignified sincerity. When it came time for the vows, Lucas took Amelia's hands in his voice stronger and more certain than she had ever heard it. I, Lucas James Blackwood, take you, Amelia Grace Bennett, as my lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish. until death do us part." As Amelia repeated the vows, her voice clear and unwavering, she marveled at how differently these words felt compared to the marriage she had fled. These were not chains binding her to a loveless arrangement, but wings, lifting her toward a future filled with possibility and choice. "By the authority vested in me by the territory of Wyoming," Judge Wilson concluded, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." Lucas gathered her gently into his arm, mindful of her injured ankle, and kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. In that moment, all the fear and pain of the past weeks dissolved into something bright and unbreakable. Later, as they stood on the boardwalk outside the judge's office, the setting sun painting the western sky in hues of gold and crimson, Lucas brushed a strand of hair from Amelia's face. "What now, Mrs. Blackwood?" he asked, his voice warm with promise. Amelia leaned into his touch, savoring the newness of her married name. "We rebuild," she answered simply. "Together." He nodded, his eyes reflecting the same determination that had first drawn her to him. "It won't be easy. Nothing worthwhile ever is," she replied, echoing words her mother had once told her in a rare moment of candor. As they made their way down the street toward the hotel where they would spend their first night as husband and wife, Amelia reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought her to this moment. She had fled one marriage only to embrace another, had run from captivity into the arms of true freedom, had found her voice and helped a silent man reclaim his. And somewhere between a storm-lashed night and a judge's quiet office, she had discovered the most important truth of all, that home wasn't a place of wealth and privilege in Boston, nor even a humble ranch in Wyoming territory. Home was wherever they faced the future side by side, speaking or silent in the language of love that needed no words.